Rain streaked the windows of Helen's Seattle apartment, a gray veil over a city waking too early. At 30, she stood frozen, heart pounding, as knocks echoed from her front door. It was barely 7 a.m., yet there they were, her mom, Sister Clara, Ethan, and the kids. Suitcases piled on the steps, jackets thrown over pajamas like they'd been dropped off in a rush. No call, no warning. Just her mother's sharp voice on the phone to her dad. "Your crazy daughter won't let us in." The words stung, but they weren't new. Helen knew this game demands guilt, compliance. But today, something shifted. She didn't move toward the door. If you've ever felt crushed by family expectations or fought to hold your ground, this story's for you. Hit subscribe, join our journey, and let's explore what it means to choose yourself. The rain's steady tap matched the knot tightening in Helen's stomach as she peered through the fogged-up window of her Capitol Hill apartment. She'd carved out this small sanctuary, a sublet she'd made her own after years of bending to her family's will. Now, her mother's voice cut through the drizzle, loud and accusing, calling her father to complain about your crazy daughter who wouldn't open the door. The suitcases, the kids' tired faces, the chaos, it was a scene Helen knew too well. Her family didn't ask. They demanded, expecting her to fold as she always had. Her father's name flashed on her phone, buzzing insistently on the kitchen counter. She didn't answer, not yet. The sight of her family below stirred memories she'd tried to bury, each one a reminder of why she hesitated now. Growing up, her father had been the soft-spoken middleman, smoothing over her mother's iron-clad rules with a tired mantra, "It's not worth the fight." Peace, he believed, came at any cost, usually hers. She remembered the night before her high school prom, her dress hanging untouched in the closet. Her mother had declared the house not clean enough, a punishment for some vague offense. Helen had spent that week juggling school and shifts at a Pike Street cafe, collapsing exhausted each night. Yet her mother's verdict was final. Her father drove her to school the next morning, silent, never asking how she felt, only muttering to let it go. Upsetting her mother, he said, would ruin everything for everyone. College at the University of Washington offered no escape. During finals week, her mother called 3 times, insisting Helen babysit Clara's kids. "Just a few hours," she'd said, her tone leaving no room for argument. Helen protested she had exams, deadlines, but her father's voice came through the speakerphone, calm and coaxing. "She's tired, Helen. You're good with them. Help out." So she went, dragging herself across town, her grades slipping with every hour spent away from her studies. That lost semester never mattered to them, but it left a quiet scar in her, each memory stacked onto the next, a litany of moments where her needs were sidelined for her mother's whims, her father's silence sealing the deal. Now, in her apartment, the phone buzzed again, her father's name glowing like a command. Her mother's voice outside grew louder, a performance meant to shame her into opening the door. "We're stuck in the rain with the kids," she declared, loud enough for neighbors to hear. Helen's cheeks burned, not from guilt, but from the sting of betrayal. This wasn't about shelter. It was about control, about pulling her back into a role she'd played her whole life. If you've ever felt let down by the people who should have had your back, drop a comment below, she thought, imagining her story reaching others who knew this pain. She slid the phone across the counter, letting it vibrate into silence. For once, she wouldn't break. The rain drummed harder against Helen's window, a gray curtain blurring the world outside her Capitol Hill apartment. She stood rooted in her kitchen, her phone buzzing relentlessly, her father's name flashing like a warning. Below, on the wet steps, her mother, Clara, Ethan, and the kids waited, their suitcases a silent demand. Her mother's voice sliced through the drizzle, loud and deliberate, aimed not just at her father on the phone but at the neighbors passing by. "We're stuck out here with the kids," she proclaimed, her words a calculated act to paint Helen as the heartless one. A man with a red umbrella lingered on the sidewalk, pretending to check his watch. But Helen knew he was listening. Her mother was staging a show, and Helen was cast as the villain. She didn't move. The phone buzzed again, her father's name urging her to pick up, to smooth things over as she always had. But this time, Helen let it ring, her thumb hovering over the screen before sliding it away. Their expectations pressed down, heavy and familiar, but something in her held firm. She wasn't ready to give in, not yet. Her mother's voice rose again, dragging out syllables like chains. "She won't even open the door!" Clara shifted uncomfortably, whispering to Ethan, who kept his eyes on the ground. The kids fidgeted, one tugging at Clara's sleeve, another slumping onto a suitcase. Helen's chest tightened, not with guilt but with the sharp pain of betrayal. This wasn't just about today. It was about a lifetime of being pushed to her breaking point. Her mind drifted back 5 years to a February night, when pneumonia had left her shivering under blankets, her ribs aching with every breath. She'd been told to rest, to avoid stress, but music pounded through the walls of her family's home, laughter spilling down the hallway. The smell of pizza grease and cheap wine seeped under her door. Dragging herself from bed, blanket wrapped around her shoulders, Helen found the living room packed with strangers. Her mother stood at the center, glass in hand, smiling like a queen hosting a court. "Just a few friends from work," she'd said, dismissing Helen's confusion. Her orchid, a gift from a coworker, sat shoved into a corner, couch cushions displaced for a folding table littered with paper plates. Her father leaned by the fireplace, nodding politely to someone Helen didn't know. He saw her, saw the sweat on her forehead, the tremor in her hands, but his eyes slid away. Not one word, not one glance to acknowledge her pain. Later, when the last guest left, she asked why he hadn't spoken up. He rubbed his temple, his voice flat. It wasn't worth the fight. That phrase haunted her now, a shadow trailing every demand, every lie, every moment her mother took more than Helen could give. Her father's silence wasn't neutral. It was complicity, propping up her mother's control. Standing in her kitchen, the voices outside pressing harder, Helen saw the betrayal clearly. It wasn't just her mother's. It was theirs. Her mother's sharp demands, and her father's quiet refusal to stand up for her. The phone buzzed again, a text from her father. "What are you doing? Just let them in." The words blurred, her pulse racing with the unfairness. 2 weeks ago, she'd texted him, begging for space after a medical procedure, asking for a month to heal. He hadn't replied, hadn't checked on her. Now he appeared, not to care, but to demand her compliance. Her mother's voice grew louder, a performance for the neighbors, the kids, anyone who'd listen. Helen's jaw tightened. She stepped back from the window, pulling the curtain shut with a sharp tug, cutting off the drama below. The kitchen fell quiet, the rain's steady tap the only sound. For the first time that morning, Helen exhaled, her breath steady, her resolve unbroken. She wasn't the one knocking, begging to be let in. She was standing her ground, and in that moment, she knew the door would stay closed. By the next afternoon, the Seattle rain had softened to a misty haze, casting a gentle glow through Helen's apartment window. She stood in her kitchen, still shaken from the previous day's standoff, her mother's accusations and her father's silence lingering like a bruise. The door had remained shut, her phone ignored, but the weight of their expectations hadn't lifted. Then came a soft knock at the back door. Not the demanding pound of her family, but a tentative tap. Helen opened it to find Ivy, her old friend from the University of Washington, standing there with a paper bag of pastries from a bakery 2 blocks away. Ivy's dark hair was damp, her smile warm but cautious, as if she sensed the storm Helen was navigating. "Hey," Ivy said, stepping inside and setting the bag on the counter. "Your porch was quite the scene yesterday. The whole neighborhood's talking." Helen stayed silent, the tension from the morning still heavy. Ivy's eyes softened, her voice dropping. "I saw something else, too. At Clara's place, new people moving in. Big SUV, Washington plates, beach chairs, coolers. Looked like they were settling in for the summer." Helen's breath caught, confusion tightening her chest. Ivy continued, her words careful but clear. "I checked online later. Clara's house is listed on Airbnb. 2 months blocked out." The words hit Helen like a cold wave. 2 months. Not a weekend emergency, not a sudden crisis. Her mother and Clara had rented out the house, pocketed the money, and decided Helen's apartment would be their free fallback. The audacity burned, but the betrayal cut deeper. Her mother's performance on the steps, the suitcases, the kids, it wasn't desperation. It was a calculated plan. And her father? Helen's mind flashed to his tired voice on the phone, urging her to just let them in, without a hint of surprise. He'd known about the Airbnb listing, known they were using her, and said nothing, letting her walk into their trap. Helen shook her head, her voice a whisper. "They wanted me to carry it all, and he let them." Ivy's hand rested lightly on her arm, grounding her. "Then don't," Ivy said, her tone firm and certain. "You don't have to." Those simple words cracked open something in Helen, like sunlight piercing Seattle's clouds. For years, she'd been the one to bend, to fix, to carry her family's chaos while they gave nothing back. Ivy's words were more than advice. They were permission to say no, to choose herself. The hum of the fridge filled the quiet kitchen, the pastries untouched. Helen's appetite was gone, replaced by a clarity she hadn't felt in years. Ivy didn't push, didn't fill the silence with empty words. She stood there, a quiet anchor, reminding Helen of their college days, sneaking coffee between classes, dreaming of lives bigger than the ones they'd inherited. Ivy had always appeared when Helen needed her most. And now, 2 blocks away in Capitol Hill, she'd done it again. "You didn't know, did you?" Ivy asked, her voice gentle but piercing. Helen shook her head, the betrayal settling heavier. Her mother's manipulation was expected, but her father's silence was a wound she hadn't fully named until now. As Ivy left, the mist outside thickened, but Helen felt lighter, as if the air in her apartment had shifted. She closed the door, her fingers lingering on the handle, and for the first time, she believed she could refuse. The truth about the Airbnb listing wasn't just a revelation. It was a line in the sand. Her family had banked on her compliance, but Helen was done being their safety net. She checked the locks twice that night, her resolve hardening with each click. Tomorrow, she'd take the next step, knowing she wasn't alone. Ivy's words echoed, "Then don't." And for once, Helen wouldn't. The Seattle mist hung heavy, but inside Helen's apartment, a quiet strength was taking root. She sat in the leasing office on Capitol Hill, her pen steady as she signed her name across the lease papers. No co-signer, no trace of her parents' approval, just her name, claiming the space she'd sublet for months. The manager slid the folder across the desk with a smile. "Welcome officially," she said. Helen nodded, tucking it under her arm like armor, her heart steady with a certainty she'd rarely known. Back home, a locksmith worked at her door, the new deadbolt clicking into place with a finality that resonated in her core. Each turn of the key was a declaration. This space was hers alone. For too long, her family's demands had seeped into her life, but today, she was sealing them out. The truth about her mother and Clara's Airbnb scheme had solidified her resolve. They'd planned to use her, counting on her to fold, but Helen was done. That evening, her phone lit up her father's name, her mother's voice in the background on speaker. "You're punishing the kids, Helen," her mother snapped, her tone cutting. "They're crying. That's on you." Helen sat at her kitchen table, eyes on the lease folder, her hand unwavering. "I'm not punishing anyone," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I'm protecting myself. You should try it." Silence followed, broken by her mother's scoff. "Family doesn't shut doors," she said. "Family helps." Helen leaned forward, her words deliberate. "Family doesn't lie. You rented out Clara's house and thought I'd cave. That's not help, it's using me." Her father cleared his throat, his voice soft, pleading. "Helen, let's calm down. We can fix this quietly." That word quietly stung, a reminder of his habit of smoothing things over at her expense. "Dad," she said, her voice steady despite a tremor, "your silence is just another yes to her. If you won't defend me, stop asking me to defend myself less." The line went quiet, a faint shuffle signaling her mother's hand over the receiver. Helen hung up, the kettle whistling as steam filled the air. She poured her tea, the warmth grounding her. The new lock gleamed, a promise she'd keep to herself. The Seattle rain had softened to a gentle patter, a soothing rhythm filling Helen's apartment. She sat at her kitchen table, the lease folder open before her, its pages a testament to the life she was building. The calls from her family had stopped, the buzzing of her phone replaced by the hum of the city gulls soaring over Elliott Bay, buses rumbling down Broadway. For the first time in years, Helen wasn't bracing for the next demand. The silence wasn't oppressive. It was hers, a space she'd fought for and won. She poured her coffee, strong and unsweetened, savoring the bitterness without anyone judging her choice. The air in her apartment felt lighter, as if the walls themselves had exhaled. That night, Helen opened a folder she'd avoided for months, tucked away after her grandmother's death. Inside were estate documents, her grandmother's steady handwriting lining the margins. Helen had always believed her mother controlled everything: the tuition, money, the Bainbridge Island house, every family decision. Her mother spoke with such authority, and her father's silence had let those claims stand. But as Helen spread the papers across the table, the truth emerged in ink. The accounts her mother bragged about weren't hers. The trust for Clara's children had been reassigned to a cousin, Leora. The medical directive named a neighbor, Marta Cohen, not her mother. The Bainbridge properties deed carried a clause: "This property shall not be transferred to any heir who disregards the estate holder's boundaries." Helen's throat tightened as she traced the words. Her grandmother had seen her mother's greed, had anticipated its reach, and had written protections long before Helen found the courage to set her own boundaries. Her father's silence hit harder now. His "it's complicated" had been a choice, letting her mother's narrative stand unchallenged. He'd never corrected her, never intervened, leaving Helen to bear their demands. Now, with the folder open, she saw his silence for what it was: complicity. A betrayal as deep as her mother's manipulations. She stacked the papers neatly, their truth no longer hidden. Her grandmother had given her a roadmap for boundaries, and Helen was ready to follow it. Days passed, each quieter than the last. Helen woke to the city's rhythm, not her parents' demands. She ate when she was hungry, not when someone expected a meal. The lease folder stayed on the table, a solid reminder of her new start. She hung a photo of her grandmother in her garden, sunlight cutting across her face, a woman who'd known the cost of silence and protected Helen in death as she couldn't in life. Helen signed the lease again, her pen pressing grooves into the paper, no cosigner, no conditions, just her name. The keys in her hand felt like a vow, their weight anchoring her. Sitting in her armchair by the window, coffee cooling beside her, Helen reflected on family. She'd been taught that love meant sacrifice, that saying no was betrayal. But now, she saw it differently. Family should be chosen, not endured. Love wasn't a currency for compliance. The rain tapped softly outside, and Helen felt the truth settle. She'd warned them, and this time, she'd kept her promise to herself. Her apartment, with its bare walls and new lock, wasn't empty. It was hers, earned through every boundary she'd set. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's survival. Choosing yourself doesn't mean rejecting others, it means building a life where you can thrive. If Helen's story resonates, if you've fought to claim your space, hit subscribe and join our community. Share your journey in the comments. We're here to lift each other up as we forge our own paths.